2, 1, 2.
Let's do this. This is a podcast from the Bray Drugs Awareness Forum.
Hello, I'm Ger Rowe of Bray Youth Service Drugs Awareness Programme, working on behalf of the Bray Drugs Awareness Forum. In this, the 7th episode of our podcast series, I spoke to Tracey Toner of Barnardos Bray, a relatively new addition to the individual and family support services funded under the Bray Local Drugs and Alcohol Task Force.
This is a podcast from the Bray Drugs Awareness Forum.
So let me introduce myself. My name is Tracey. I'm a project worker for Barnardos Family Support. I'm based in our Bray project, which is on the Dublin Road in Bray. But I am part of the wider family support team, which is based in Ballyogan. As I said, I'm based full-time in Bray, but I also have my colleague Marion, who works with me part-time in Bray, and she co-locates between both projects or both services. Just some kind of background information on the project and kind of let you know where, how Barnardos came about in Bray. We opened in Bray in 2020, right during the pandemic. Prior to that, I had been working in Bray for 12 years on a part-time basis with no fixed premises. I had been based in Killarney Road Addiction Service one morning a week, which is now the primary care building. However, at that point in an addiction clinic, wasn't suitable for bringing children, so we relied heavily on the community to give us rooms and what have you. So obviously Little Bray Resource Centre, St Fergus Family Resource Centre, BCAT, schools, Specs, they'd all been great about giving us a room and they kindly obliged. However, we needed a premises of our own, so that's kind of how we came about.
You mentioned there, Tracey, that as a relatively new entrant into the range of services available in the Bray area, that you started the service during the COVID crisis. I presume that must have been quite a challenge for you. Yeah,
yes, it was, Ger. It is quite a challenge because, like most services, most people have been affected in some shape or form by COVID. In relation to Barnardos service provisions, it's been difficult to keep up with maybe public health lines, HSE guidelines, and they've been changing so fast on a dramatic pace. So, the speed of the change has been fast for us, so that's hard. Like at one point, our services needed to kind of switch to almost crisis intervention, delivering food, delivering school supplies, resources for children, and kind of arts and crafts, that type of play packs, which brought a different kind and a different level of work. And also the other thing in relation to COVID and our service, there was a lot of missed appointments due to isolation, or people in self-isolation, or people that had COVID themselves, so there was the inconsistency, which is hard. As you can imagine, in our line of work, it's hard when you've got inconsistency. You like to be able to recap and follow through each week on the previous session, but then if you've got a gap of 2 weeks, it's kind of hard. So in the relation to the effect of COVID on families and children, it was different, yeah. At the very start of the pandemic, we were unable to deliver direct parent support in the home environment, which is something that we do deliver. So we deliver our Barnardos service called Partnership with Parents, which is a home-based, tailored support programme for parents. But again, it's done in the home environment because that's their natural learning environment and it's where you would learn best, I would imagine. And then the other element of COVID on our work was when you're delivering food, hampers and supplies and you're trying to talk to a parent or a child on a doorstep, you've got no privacy. You can't talk about anything other than maybe generalised stuff. Can't talk about anything private. It's not the environment that we would be used to, or a child or a parent would be used to. They'd be used to a welcoming environment, private, calm, safe, parent-child centred, trauma-informed environment, and that's what we would normally provide. So that can be difficult. The other thing that I notice in relation to COVID and changes in our work, a lot of our young people that would have been experiencing anxiety anyway prior to COVID, prior to our pandemic, it drove them deeper into their home environment and heightened the anxiety. So we found it even harder to engage them, which, was difficult. And obviously the young person then didn't have the outlet of school. If you've got situations in a home environment where you've domestic abuse or domestic violence, then there's no outlet such as school or attending Barnardos Family Support. COVID made that harder. So yeah, there was a lot of elements to COVID and a lot of elements to opening a family support project in the middle of a pandemic, I suppose.
Tracey said that despite the difficult operational changes imposed by COVID restrictions, there were some positive aspects that arose that might help in the future.
There was some engagement with parents that they, engage via video calls or Zooms and things like that. That might have suited some parents in the home environment. And going forward, that might still suit them. And we'll still offer that if need be. Because if you've got smaller children and you're having to get out and get children ready to come to our centre, that could be difficult. So we may look at, so that can be a positive. We're not saying that we will offer that to every parent and that's the way forward. The big positive that I had noticed to children and families that we work with in Barnardos is it had brought some parents very much together. They were at home together, they were out walking together, they were out, a lot more physical activity, maybe out on their bikes, out walking. So from that sense, some of our families, that has been a big positive. Particularly if you're, and as you can imagine here, if you're working yourself and you've got smaller children and you're trying to manage everything and fit everything in, it can be difficult.
So what exactly does the Barnardos service in Bray do?
I suppose in a nutshell, Ger, we support families. That's what we do in lots of different ways. So we provide family support intervention designed to respond to families where drug and alcohol misuse is affecting the well-being and the development of children and young people and families. We deliver a range of services and interventions to target children from pre-birth to 15. And we work with parents in recovery, seeking support for their addiction or addiction per se within the family in some shape or form, and it's impacting the child or the family.
Okay, Tracey, so in your opinion and working with families within your service, do you find that alcohol or prescription drugs or whatever, what's the bigger factor, what's the bigger issue for families these days?
I suppose I can't fully say and comment and say there's more of prescription drugs than alcohol use or have you. If I'm thinking back to kind of when I started in Barnardos almost 15 years ago, what have you, I was based in an addiction clinic in Dunleary, so obviously yes, substance misuse such as heroin was a big factor, but we've moved on and patterns and trends of drugs move on. I feel currently at this moment in time, I personally feel hidden harm is the big issue here, as in alcohol misuse hidden harm, because if you are living as a child in a home, in an environment with problematic alcohol misuse, it's been recognised as adverse childhood experience. So science shows that ACEs can cause toxic stress, which is harmful, for a child's development. If you look at statistically, there's 200,000 children in Ireland living in homes impacted by alcohol misuse. According to Alcohol Action in Ireland, there's 1 in 10 children affected. That's a lot. It's high. Their lives are negatively affected by parents' misuse of alcohol, and I suppose the economic consequences of alcohol on the community and all the families, and it's not just the actual person that's misusing the substance, it's the whole family unit. And I suppose our society is acceptance to alcohol and our attitudes to alcohol, it's linked to most celebrations or sporting events, the whole relationship we have as a society with alcohol goes way back. You've got codependencies in relationships, you've got abusive relations both verbally and physically, and I suppose for children impacted by parental alcohol misuse, it's not always often publicly visible. And therefore children aren't known to services, and they can be within the most vulnerable in society. If you think even during COVID, if we look at alcohol misuse during COVID even, individuals were at home drinking, there's no escape for a child, whereas they were using their normal social outlets of going to pubs or restaurants or what have you, and there was somewhat of a break and children were going to school. Conflict became the norm then, and misuse of alcohol became the norm. There's no closing time at home. Families would be inviting other people over to the home, whereas normally they would be socialising in a different way. So again, that's hard and difficult for a child to be in that environment when there's no getting away from it, I suppose.
You mentioned there the hidden harm aspect. That's something that a lot of people hear about, but maybe you're not entirely sure what it is. Can you explain to us what hidden harm actually is?
Yeah. As you said, you're a hidden harm you hear word thrown out all the time. I suppose it's the experience of children living with and affected by parental misuse, parental substance misuse. That's become known as hidden harm because children are often unknown to services. They're just not known. That's not to say that all parents that misuse substances experience difficulty with their parenting capacity. Equally, it's not to say that all children exposed to parental substance misuse are affected adversely in the short term or long term. However, most children exposed to it will need some support in some way, you know. And then I suppose in relation to hidden harm, like parents' own trauma and triggers can cause a parent to become dysregulated. Therefore, parents need that support. I suppose the best way I can describe it, Jerry, is if you're a parent and you're becoming dysregulated, you can't pour from an empty cup. I always think of a lovely Ryanair host doing the oxygen breathe and put your own one on first and then tend to the children. And that's the best way to describe it, because how can you give to somebody else if you're not topped up yourself? And I suppose the other thing in relation why we're talking about hidden harm, we need to have open conversations about hidden harm. We need to move and shift from, look, he's a lovely man or he's a lovely woman, he just has a couple of drinks, what's the harm, or parents saying, well, my children don't know I drink, they don't know I use drugs, but let's have open conversations about it in an age appropriate way. And I suppose everybody needs to be on board. Teachers, sports teachers, youth services, neighbours, clubs, whatever, everyone. We all need to create awareness. And I suppose the other thing is children now are so knowledgeable about lots of issues like climate change, consent, sexuality. They're so knowledgeable. So, let's make them even more knowledgeable and discuss hidden harm and the impact. Because if children can discuss it openly, then that's creating less stigma. Then they're feeling they're not on their own. It's not just me that's going through this. So that's kind of hidden harm, I suppose, in a bit of a nutshell.
You mentioned other organisations like schools, sports clubs, and other places where children may be involved in for different reasons.
Yeah.
Do you think there needs to be a greater awareness of hidden harm outside of the treatment and direct drug support agencies?
Yeah, I think so, because lots of times I'm not saying this about every school or every club or anything, and I'm definitely not saying that. But lots of times you can only work with the information you're given. So if you're a teacher or you're principal of a school and a child arrives at your door in junior infants and you don't have any knowledge of anything else, you're trying to piece, it must be extremely difficult because you're trying to piece together, why is this child falling asleep during the day? Why is this child presenting this way? Why is this behaviour this way? And that's not to say there could be other reasons why a child is falling asleep. There's be medical reasons, but if you're not aware that there is some harm, hidden harm, then how can you work collaboratively? And sometimes, when I speak to parents, they'll be like, well, I'm not going to tell the school everything, or I'm not going to tell the club, or they don't need to know. Again, it's back to the stigma, it's back to the secrets, it's back to the maybe some level of shame. So yes, I do think, everybody needs to be on board, Jerry. Yeah, definitely.
A main focus of the Barnardos approach is to identify a trusted adult to support the child in crisis.
If it's not the parent, we'll try and identify somebody within the circle, the family unit, or one good parent, because in turn they would take over the role that we and the skills that we have been giving and strategies we've been giving the children that we work with. So in turn the parent will take that over, or the one good adult. And I suppose we all know the research has shown that one good adult can have a massive impact on a child's self-esteem and their overall well-being, and they're more likely to speak and ask for help if they've got one good adult. So that's a crucial piece.
So Tracey, I know you've had a lot of involvement within the Bray area prior to your introduction of the service for Barnardos. And looking back at your experience, do you think that we have enough services in the community at Bray here to support families and young people affected by substance misuse?
I suppose, Ger, it's not a straight yes or no answer to that one, and I'm probably not going to be very popular by saying yes, we have enough services in Bray. We've a range of services and we do interagency work well. I really feel we do. I think it's the lack of funding that's the issue, and the lack of remit that a service has. And there's many layers to substance misuse or parental substance misuse. So, it requires a level of support from, whether it be early years, family support, whether it's treatment and rehab, we need to look at policy changes, we need to look at funding, we need to look at medical needs, we need to look at trauma awareness, we have mental health services. So there is a lot of wraparound services that we have. But again, it's funding, waiting lists. I suppose I am hopeful that maybe there could be a change, but again, I'm not a policymaker. But I do think the services that we have, we work well collaboratively together, but I just think it's a funding issue.
To wrap up then, do you want to talk a bit about the services you provide and how people can contact Barnardos and what's the best method of doing that?
So I suppose we provide a lot of intervention, but our core services we provide are individual work with parents, partnership with parents, which I spoke a little bit about, which is a home-based programme, individual work, parent-child work, sibling work, practical family support, family work. We offer, for individually, we offer a programme called, which is a Barnardos programme, This Is Me programme. The overall aim of this programme is to promote resilience and well-being. It's a 18-week programme, and it's from age 6 to 12 years, thereabouts. So I suppose it's the connection of the mind, body and heart to give the children that connection, We also offer a Just Right State programme for children and for adults. It's just a 6-week programme, and it's support children and parents to understand the process of self-regulation. And that's, it's a program. We recently just trained in SAI training, which is sensorial attachment intervention. That part of our training, we've just trained and accredited in it. A lot of our team is trained in it. It's to help children self-regulate through the use of food and sensorial based activities. So, it's quite good, and it can be done in a group setting or individually. We also use Karen Treisman's training, which is her programme, I should say, which is the impact of trauma on child development. And we also use creative mindfulness programmes with children, which is the one that we use with Louise Shacker's creative mindfulness, which is really good. But again, it's not for everybody. Not every child likes mindfulness. Not every parent does. It really depends. We can tailor our programs. I suppose that's just a whistle-stop tour of our services. But I suppose how we refer, we accept self-referrals and professional referrals. You can email Tracey.Toner@barnardos.ie. You can phone the mobile, which is 087 926 2481. You can pop into the service. That's the nice thing and the beauty about being directly in a community, that people often tend to knock on the door. Which is really nice. The details of how you refer, it's a referral form. Professional referral form will be very different than the self-referral. But I suppose our remit is addiction. Our catchment area is Bray and surrounding areas, because we are funded by the Drugs Task Force. That's not to say that all our Barnardos projects, their remit is addiction, because our Ballyogan family support, which I am part of the wider team, that will work with all other areas such as mental health, bereavement, loss, addiction, complex needs, obviously. So yeah, that's how you refer. I suppose I'd just like to take this opportunity to thank Bray Drug Awareness Forum for inviting me. Thanks for your time, and I hope maybe anybody listening will take something from it. Even if you take one thing, well then my job is done, really.
That's good. Well, thank you very much, Tracey. And it's something that we feel very strongly about. The reason why we started up this podcast series is to raise awareness of what actually is available in the area, both for members of the public and also for professionals working in the area too, that we know each other and that we can, contact each other if we have a problem, and particularly signposting. As you know, signposting goes in many directions, and it can go from us to you and from you to us and everything else.
Exactly.
And I think that's very important. I think it's important that all of the services working in the Bray area know what everybody else is doing and how it can fit into what they're trying to do as well.
Thank you, Chair.
This is a podcast from the Bray Drugs Awareness Forum.
That was Tracey Toner from Barnardos Bray, a relatively new addition to the family support services available in Bray and working in the areas of drug and alcohol misuse. The contact details for Barnardos Bray are listed on the screen now. I'd like to thank Tracey for her time in talking to us about her service, and I hope the discussion was of interest to you. I'm Ger Rowe of Bray Youth Service for the Bray Drugs Awareness Forum.
This is a podcast from the Bray Drugs Awareness Forum.